Oh honey, if you told me a year ago that a simple batch of oatmeal cookies would unravel the fragile threads of my family like that, I'd have laughed it off over a cup of chamomile tea. But there I was standing in my own kitchen, the one I'd scrubbed and seasoned for 40 years, with a plate of warm golden treats in front of me, the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar curling up like an old friend's hug. My daughter-in-law Lila had slid them across the counter with that bright smile of hers, the one that crinkled her eyes just so and said, "For you, Mom. From scratch just like you taught me." Mom. The word still warmed me back then, like sunlight slipping through the lace curtains. I bit into one, the chew soft and familiar, and for a moment everything felt right. But oh child, that sweetness hid a bitterness I never saw coming. A poison not just in the dough, but in the heart behind it. It was my worst fear come to life, that the woman my son loved might one day turn our home into a battlefield. All because of words I thought were just wisdom from an old woman who'd seen too many sunsets. I remember the exact afternoon it started to shift, though looking back, the signs were there, whispering like dry leaves underfoot. It was late spring, the kind where the air hangs heavy with lilac and the promise of longer days. My name's Evelyn, Evie to those who know me best, and at 62 I'd long since traded the rush of raising toddlers for the quiet rhythm of an empty nest. My husband Tom passed 5 years back from that quiet heart attack that sneaks up on men like him. Steady, hard-working types who give everything and ask for nothing. Left me with the house on Maple Street, a garden that bloomed wild in summer, and our boy Daniel. Danny, as I still call him in my softer thoughts, even though he's 34 now, with a jaw like his father's and eyes that crinkle when he laughs. Danny and I had always been close, the way you are when it's just the two of you against the world's little cruelties. After Tom went, it was him who mowed the lawn on Sundays, him who insisted on family dinners even when his work at the mill kept him late. "Can't let you eat alone, Ma," he'd say, plunking down a 6-pack of root beer and whatever takeout we pretend was homemade. I'd fuss over him, smoothing his collar, asking about his day. Not prying, mind you, just the gentle nudges of a mother who knows silence can grow weeds. And then Lila came along like a gust of wind through an open window, fresh and a little disheveled. They met at a county fair of all places. Danny manning the funnel cake booth for extra cash, Lila wandering the midway with her camera, snapping shots of cotton candy clouds and Ferris wheel lights. She was 28, with hair the color of chestnuts in autumn and a laugh that carried over the midway din. An artist, she called herself, freelancing graphic designs from a tiny apartment downtown, dreaming of her own gallery someday. When Danny brought her home for the first time, I was elbow deep in pie crust, the kitchen radio humming an old Patsy Cline tune. "Ma, this is Lila," he said, his arm around her waist like she was the most precious thing he'd ever held. She extended a flour-dusted hand. "Wait, no, that was me," and said, "I've heard so much about your apple pies, Mrs. Hargrove. Danny says they're magic." I liked her right away. That easy way she fit into the room without trying too hard. We sat at the oak table Tom and I had picked out at a flea market 30 years prior, its surface scarred from countless meals and homework sessions. I poured coffee, strong black the way Danny takes it, and Lila sipped hers with a little cream, swirling it like she was painting the mug. We talked about everything and nothing. Her folks back in Ohio, how she'd moved here chasing a boyfriend who fizzled out. My stories of Danny as a boy, building forts in the backyard with sticks and sheer will. He was always the protector, I told her, watching her eyes light up as she leaned into him. That night, as they left with a doggy bag of pie, Danny hugged me tight in the doorway, whispering, "She's the one, Ma. I can feel it." My heart swelled, full as the moon rising over the pines. For the first time since Tom, the house didn't echo quite so empty. The wedding was small, the backyard kind, with folding chairs on the grass and wildflowers in mason jars. I wore the blue dress I'd hemmed myself, the one with pearl buttons down the back, and Lila chose something simple, ivory lace that caught the breeze. We said vows under the old maple, its leaves rustling like applause, and I cried when Danny slipped the ring on her finger, a simple gold band engraved with their initials. "To new beginnings," the officiant said, and I toasted with lemonade, the tartness lingering on my tongue. Afterward, as folks milled about with plates of deviled eggs and my famous potato salad, Lila pulled me aside by the garden shed. "Evie," she said. She'd started calling me that after the ceremony, like we were already conspirators. "Thank you for making this feel like home." Her hand on my arm was warm, genuine, and I squeezed it back thinking, this is it. Family whole again. In those early months we fell into a rhythm that felt like grace. Sundays became our ritual. Danny would fire up the grill for burgers, the smoke curling lazy into the sky, while Lila and I tackled the kitchen. I'd show her my mother's recipes, scribbled on faded index cards yellowed with age, the oatmeal cookies with raisins plump as secrets, the lemon bars that puckered your lips just right. See here, I'd say, tapping the card for the cookies, my voice dropping conspiratorial. A pinch of nutmeg. That's the trick. Makes it taste like childhood. Lila would nod, her brow furrowed in that focused way artists have, measuring flour with a steady hand. The air would fill with the buttery melt of it all, and we'd chat easy meandering talks about her latest sketches, or how Danny snored like a freight train after a long shift. One afternoon, as we kneaded dough side by side, our elbows brushing, she opened up about her own mother. She was always after perfection, Lila said, her voice soft against the hum of the mixer. White gloves for company, you know. Made me feel like I'd never measure up. I paused, wiping flour from my cheek with the back of my wrist, and looked at her, really looked. There were shadows under her eyes, faint as watercolor washes, and something vulnerable in the set of her mouth. Oh, sweetheart, I murmured, resting a hand on hers, the dough sticky between our fingers. Family's not about measuring up. It's about showing up messy as we are. She smiled then, a real one that reached her eyes, and we finished the batch laughing over a story of Danny once mistaking salt for sugar in my brownies. Those moments, child, they stitched us together thread by quiet thread. I started to dream of grandbabies, of holidays with more voices around the table, of passing on these recipes like heirlooms. But dreams have a way of fraying at the edges if you don't watch close. It started small, the way these things do. A hesitation in her laugh, a glance that lingered too long on her phone when I spoke. I'd catch her scrolling through feeds of sleek kitchens and minimalist lives, her thumb pausing on images of women in crisp aprons, all poise and polish. Just inspiration, she'd say if I asked, tucking the phone away with a shrug. I let it slide, chalking it up to the jitters of newlywed life, the adjustment to our little world of worn linoleum and creaky stairs. After all, who'd want to trade the fairy tale for the everyday? Still, there were nights I'd lie awake in my bed, the ceiling fan whirring soft overhead, wondering if I was holding on too tight, if my stories from the old days, tales of mending socks by lamplight or stretching $1 through winter, were burdens more than bridges. And then came the day that cracked the first fissure, subtle as a hairline in porcelain, the kind you don't notice until the whole thing shatters. It was a Thursday in early July, the heat pressing against the windows like an uninvited guest, turning the house into a greenhouse of sighs and sticky counters. Danny had texted that morning, late shift, ma. Dinner's on you too. So Lila and I planned a simple supper. Roast chicken from the market, green beans snapped fresh from the garden, and cornbread baked in my cast iron skillet, the one with the handle wrapped in cloth to keep from burning your palm. I was at the sink, rinsing the beans under cool water that shocked my wrists, when Lila breezed in from her studio out back, a converted shed she'd claimed for her paints and laptop, its door always ajar like an afterthought. She looked flushed, her tank top clinging in dark patches under the arms, a streak of cobalt blue smudged across her forearm like a bruise. Hot as Hades out there, she said, fanning herself with a sketch pad, the pages riffling like dry leaves. I chuckled, handing her a dish towel to wipe down, and we fell into our routine, me chopping onions that stung my eyes to smarting tears, her setting the table with the mismatched china Tom and I had collected over decades, each plate holding a memory like a secret compartment. As the chicken sizzled in the oven, filling the air with rosemary and garlic's sharp bite, I wiped my hands on my apron and turned to her. Lila, honey, I've been meaning to ask, how's that portrait commission coming? The one of the mayor's wife. She paused, mid-fold of a napkin, her fingers tightening just a fraction on the linen. Oh, it's progressing. She's a handful, wants her eyes soulful but not too intense. Her laugh came out light, but it didn't land quite right, like a note played flat on an out-of-tune guitar. I nodded, stirring the beans in their pot, the wooden spoon scraping against enamel with a familiar rasp. That's when I shared it, the bit of advice I'd been mulling since our last baking session, born from watching her scroll those perfect feeds. You know, in my day we didn't chase every shiny thing online. Folks built real lives brick by brick. Social media's like fool's gold, sweetheart. Looks pretty but leaves you hollow if you dig too deep. I said it gentle, leaning on the counter with a smile, thinking it wisdom wrapped in care, The way I'd tell Danny to pace himself at the mill. Lila's face shifted then, a flicker so quick I might have imagined it. A tightening around her mouth, her eyes dropping to the napkin she twisted into a knot. Yeah, well, times change, Evie, she replied, her voice even, but with an edge like the first cool breath before a storm. She smoothed the cloth out flat, too flat, and changed the subject to the weather, the words tumbling fast as if to bury what I'd said. I let it go, chalking it up to the heat making temper short, and we ate in companionable quiet when Danny finally dragged in, his work boots leaving faint mud prints on the hall rug. He devoured the chicken, grease shining on his chin, praising Lila's table setting like she'd conjured the meal from thin air. You two are a team, he said, winking at me, and for a heartbeat the warmth returned, pooling in my chest like honey. But that night as I cleared the dishes, stacking plates with the soft clink of bone china, suds bubbling warm over my knuckles, something nagged at me, a loose thread pulling at the hem of my thoughts. It wasn't her words exactly, but the way she'd said them, clipped and distant, like a door closing on a room I wasn't invited into. I dried my hands on the faded floral towel, its threads worn soft from years of use, and glanced out the window toward her studio. The light was still on, a golden spill across the grass, and I could see her silhouette moving, arms gesturing as if in conversation. With Danny snoring softly from the guest room down the hall, he always crashed here after long days, I stepped out onto the porch, the screen door creaking on its hinges, the night air thick with cricket song and the faint, earthy tang of turned soil. Curiosity, that old meddler, tugged me closer, my slippers whispering over the dew-kissed lawn. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, Lord no, but voices carry on a still evening, and hers came clear as a confession through the cracked window. Honestly, Danny, your mom's sweet and all, but that advice? Like I'm some kid who needs schooling on life. Fool's gold, she says. As if her whole world's not stuck in the 50s mending socks, stretching dollars. It's embarrassing, babe. Makes me feel like I'm playing house in a museum. A pause, then Danny's low chuckle, muffled but unmistakable. Ah, come on, Lil. She's just looking out for you. Old habits. But she pressed on, her tone sharpening like a knife on whetstone. Looking out? Or holding me back? I baked those cookies today thinking it'd smooth things, but if she keeps with the lectures, maybe I'll lace the next batch with something to loosen her up, a little laxative surprise for all that wisdom. I froze there in the shadows, my breath catching like a hook in my throat, the words landing heavy as stones in still water. Laxative? In the cookies, the ones she'd pressed into my hands that very afternoon, still warm from the oven, their edges crisp and inviting? My stomach twisted, not from fear exactly, but from a colder ache, the kind that settles in your bones when trust frays. It was meant as a joke, surely, petty yes, but born of frustration, the clash of worlds I'd sensed but ignored. I backed away slow, my slippers sodden now, the porch light buzzing faint overhead like a warning. Inside, I eased the door shut, the latch clicking soft as a secret sealed, and leaned against the wall, heart thudding against my ribs. The house, so full of echoes earlier, felt vast and hollow, the clock in the hall ticking louder, each second a reminder of the girl I'd welcomed like a daughter, now casting me as relic, as burden. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay staring at the ceiling, the fan's blades slicing shadows across the plaster, replaying her words in loops. Embarrassing, museum, laxative, surprise. By morning the cookies sat innocent on the counter, a few crumbs scattered like confetti from a cruel party. I didn't touch them, couldn't, the cinnamon now cloying in memory. Danny shuffled in for coffee, planting a kiss on my temple, oblivious as ever. Smells amazing in here, Ma. Lila's turning into you. I forced a smile, pouring his mug with hands that trembled just enough to slosh the dark brew, and watched him bite into one crunch, swallow, grin. Perfection. My worst fear flickered then, not the poison itself, but the poison of division, the slow seep of resentment that could turn love to ash. I said nothing, swallowing the hurt like bitter tea. But oh child, the seed of doubt had taken root, and it grew thorns overnight. The days blurred after that, each one laced with watchful quiet. I'd catch myself studying Lila across the breakfast table, noting the way her smile didn't always reach her eyes, or how she'd pocket her phone when I entered a room, as if guarding fragments of a life I no longer fit into. We still baked corn muffins one Sunday, the batter thick and golden, but my stories came rarer, tucked away like fragile china. She'd ask questions, tentative about the recipes, and I'd answer short, my voice steady but the warmth dimmed. Just follow the card, dear. It knows. Danny noticed nothing, or if he did, he bridged it with his easy chatter, tales of the mill's latest mishaps or plans for a weekend hike. But in the silences, when the three of us sat with the radio low, playing those old country tunes, I'd feel it, the undercurrent pulling like a riptide, threatening to drag us under. It built slow, that suspicion, fed by small slights I told myself were nothing. A sigh when I mentioned church potlucks, her eyes rolling faint when I folded laundry the old way, pins first. And then 2 weeks later, another batch of cookies, chocolate chip this time, studded with walnuts she'd toasted herself. She presented them after dinner, the plate balanced on her hip like an offering, her voice light as meringue. Try one, Evie. I added that nutmeg trick. I took it, the warmth seeping into my palm, and bit down, the chocolate melting rich on my tongue. But as I chewed, her eyes held mine a beat too long. A glint there, amusement? Challenge? That sent a chill racing down my spine. That night, alone in the bathroom with the door latched, I waited, stomach churning not from sweetness, but from the dread pooling cold and insistent. And when the cramps hit, sharp as betrayal, twisting me over the sink with sweat beading my forehead, I knew. Not a joke anymore. My worst fear baked right in. The cramps came in waves that night, each one rolling through me like a tide pulling at sand, leaving me hollowed out and gasping. I huddled on the cool tile of the bathroom floor, my nightgown twisted around my legs, the porcelain sink a cold anchor under my forehead as sweat traced salty paths down my temples. The house was silent save for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling beams, but inside me it was a storm, sharp, unrelenting, the kind that makes you question every choice that led you here. I didn't call out, wouldn't wake Danny or Lila with my misery. Pride, or maybe just the ache of not wanting to see pity in their eyes, kept my lips pressed thin. By dawn it had eased to a dull throb, leaving me shaky and spent, the mirror reflecting back a woman with hollow cheeks and eyes shadowed like bruised plums. I splashed water on my face, the droplets cold as judgment, and straightened my spine. Enough, I thought, toweling dry with hands that still trembled. Time to know for sure. Morning light slanted through the kitchen blinds in pale gold bars, catching the dust motes dancing lazy over the counter where the cookie plate sat, half empty now, crumbs like accusations scattered on the butcher block. Danny was already up, rummaging in the fridge for his lunch fixings, leftover chicken wrapped in foil, an apple polished to a shine on his sleeve. He glanced over, concern furrowing his brow as I eased into a chair, the wooden seat groaning soft under my weight. You okay, Ma? Look like you didn't sleep a wink. His voice was rough with sleep, genuine as the calluses on his palms from the mill. I managed a nod, forcing my lips into a curve that felt more like a grimace. Just the heat, son. Gets to these old bones. He bought it, or wanted to, pressing a kiss to my hair before grabbing his keys, the jangle a punctuation to his hurried goodbye. Love you. See you tonight. Lila appeared then, padding in barefoot, her robe belted loose over sleep shorts, hair tousled in that effortless way that used to charm me. She poured coffee, the pot gurgling its last dark drops, and slid a mug my way without a word, her eyes flicking over me quick, assessing or avoiding. Morning, she said finally, settling across from me with her own cup, steam curling up between us like a veil. The silence stretched, thick as the humidity outside, broken only by the tick of the wall clock and the faint drip from the faucet. I watched her sip, the porcelain warm against her lips, and something in me cracked, not loud but deep like ice giving under pressure. The words from that night replayed, her voice clear as if she sat whispering them now. Laxative surprise, loosen her up. And these cramps, this bone-deep fatigue, they weren't coincidence, not with the timing, the taste lingering faint on my tongue like betrayal's aftertaste. I set my mug down deliberate, the ceramic clinking sharp against the saucer, and met her gaze steady. Lila, I started, my voice low, even the way you'd coax a skittish cat from under the porch. Those cookies last night. They were something special, weren't they? She blinked, surprise flickering across her face like a shadow passing over water. Then she smiled, that bright, deflecting curve. Glad you liked them. The walnuts really made it, huh? But I didn't smile back, just held her eyes, letting the quiet build until it pressed against the walls. Her fingers tightened on her mug, knuckles paling, and I saw it then, the shift, the wariness creeping in like fog off the river. What's this about, Evie? She asked, tone sharpening just a hair. Defensive as a bramble hedged, I took a breath. the air tasting of stale coffee and unspoken hurt, and leaned forward, elbows on the table scarred from years of elbows just like these. "I heard you, honey. Out by the studio 2 weeks back. Talking to Danny about my old-fashioned ways. About how embarrassing it all is. And that bit about the cookies. Lacing them with laxatives to loosen me up." The words hung there, heavy as lead sinkers, and her face drained of color, the mug slipping from her grip to slosh dark rivulets across the wood. She stared at the spill, not me, her breath coming shallow, and for a moment the kitchen felt too small, the air too thick to draw. You were listening," she whispered, finally lifting her eyes wide, wounded like I'd struck her. Wounded? Oh child, that stung deeper than the cramps ever could. "Wasn't trying to," I said, soft but firm, my hands folding in my lap to still their tremble. "But sound carries, Lila. And last night, well, let's just say your recipe worked a treat. Left me up half the night, paying the price." Disbelief crossed her features first, then horror, blooming slow like ink in water. Eyes widening, a hand flying to her mouth as if to trap a gasp. "Evie, that was a joke. Just venting, you know? Danny and we say stupid things when we're tired." I wouldn't. But her voice cracked, the denial fraying at the edges, and I saw the truth in the way she wouldn't quite meet my gaze. The flush creeping up her neck not from shame alone, but from the lie she'd told herself it was harmless. Shock hit me then, not in a rush but slow, seeping cold through my chest like winter draft under a door. A disbelief that this girl, this woman I'd folded into my heart like a favorite quilt, could harbor such petty venom. Heartbreak followed, twisting sharp, memories flashing quick. Her hand in mine over dough, her laugh echoing in the garden, the way she'd called me Mom that first Christmas. Unwrapping the scarf I'd knit with yarn soft as hope, that ill enough, didn't it? My advice. Sharing what little I know from a life that's bent but not broken. It hurt you that much? Enough to poison me, even in play. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and unbidden, but I blinked them back. Dignity a thin thread holding me upright. She shook her head fierce, standing abrupt, the chair scraping harsh against the linoleum. "It's not like that. You're always with the lessons, the old ways like mine aren't good enough. Like I'm some project to fix. I just wanted, I don't know, space. To breathe without feeling judged." The words landed like slaps, each one stinging with truth I'd been too blind to see. My care well meant, landing as chains. But beneath the hurt, anger flickered, not wild but steady, a coal glowing in ash. "Judged," I said, rising slow, my hands flat on the table for balance, the wood warm under my palms from the sun's early touch. "Honey, I've opened my home, my heart, to you. Shared stories I thought might bridge us, not burden. If that's judgment, then call me guilty. But this," I gestured to the plate, the crumbs mocking us both. "This crosses a line, Lila. From words to harm. Even small, it's poison." She crumpled then, sinking back into the chair, tears spilling free now, tracking silent down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she choked out, the words raw, ragged. "God, Evie, I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I bought the stuff as a gag, mixed a tiny bit, but seeing you like this, what have I done?" We sat there, the clock marking time in relentless ticks, the coffee gone cold between us. Confrontation hung heavy, the air thick with unsaid regrets, her sobs quieting to hiccuping breaths while I stood frozen, the ache in my gut mirroring the one in my soul. Disbelief warred with a deeper sorrow, not just for the act, but for the fracture it revealed, the illusion of family we'd both clung to. "Why?" I asked finally, soft as a prayer, sinking back into my seat, our knees nearly brushing under the table. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand, smearing mascara in faint streaks. "I guess I miss my mom sometimes, the way she got me, flaws and all. And you're so strong, Evie, but it makes me feel small. Like I'll never measure up to your world." Her voice trembled, vulnerable now, peeling back layers I'd only glimpsed before. I reached across then, hesitant, my fingers brushing hers, cold, clammy, and she didn't pull away. "Oh, child," I murmured, the anger ebbing like tide to shore, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "We all feel small sometimes. But hurting each other? That doesn't make us bigger." The conversation stretched, words tumbling, halting between us, her confessions spilling like overflow from a too-full cup, my own admissions following reluctant. How Tom's passing left me clinging to traditions like lifelines, afraid of fading into irrelevance. By the time Danny's truck rumbled up the drive hours later, the sun high and unforgiving, We'd forged a fragile truce, her hand still in mine, the plate of cookies pushed aside like evidence sealed away. But oh, the betrayal lingered, a shadow in the corners whispering that trust, once cracked, doesn't mend clean. As his key turned in the lock, calling out a cheerful lunch crew assemble, I squeezed her fingers once, a silent vow. We'll face this together. Or try to. Little did I know the real storm was just gathering, ready to break over us all. Danny's arrival shattered the hush like a stone through glass, his voice booming from the hall with that boyish energy that always lightened the air. What's for lunch? Smells like heaven in here, Ma's famous grilled cheese. He rounded the corner, toolbox still slung over one shoulder, sawdust clinging to his jeans like faint constellations, and froze midstep, his grin fading as he took us in. Me at the table with eyes still rimmed red, Lila across from me, her face blotchy and raw, the coffee mugs abandoned like relics from a battlefield. The toolbox hit the floor with a dull thud, tools jangling in protest, and he crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to a crouch between us. Whoa, what happened? You two look like you wrestled a bear. His hands hovered, one on my knee, the other reaching for Lila's, concern etching lines around his mouth that hadn't been there yesterday. Lila pulled away first, wiping her nose with the back of her wrist, a watery laugh escaping that didn't fool anyone. Just girl talk, babe. Nothing big. But her voice wobbled, betraying her, and Danny's eyes flicked to me, searching, the way they had when he was little, and I'd hide scraped knees behind a smile. I covered his hand with mine, the calluses rough against my palm, and shook my head slow. Nothing, son. But it's ours to sort first. Give us the room. He hesitated, jaw tightening, that protective streak flaring. Tom's legacy, always the fixer. But he nodded, rising with a sigh that carried the weight of unspoken fears. All right. But I'm here, yeah? Burgers on me tonight if we need a reset. He leaned down, kissing Lila's temple, then mine, his lips lingering a beat longer on my forehead, warm and steady. As the screen door slapped shut behind him, the house sighed back into quiet, leaving Lila and me with the echo of his footsteps fading down the drive. I drew a breath then, deep as the roots of the old oak out front, and met her gaze across the table, hers wide, pleading. Mine steady but softened at the edges by the rawness we just peeled back. The anger from earlier had cooled to embers, not gone but banked, leaving space for something practical, something that felt like action over ache. We can't leave it here, Lila, I said, my voice even, threading calm through the tremor I felt in my chest. Words like that, deeds like this, they fester if you don't air them out. Danny needs to know. Not the ugly bits, but enough to help us mend. She nodded, quick, too quick, her fingers twisting the hem of her robe into knots. But what if he hates me? Thinks I'm some monster for the cookies. The fear in her eyes was real, child, sharp as shattered glass, reflecting back her own vulnerabilities, the girl who'd lost her way trying to find her place. I reached for the dish rag then, wiping the dried coffee spill with slow circles, the cloth absorbing the stain like forgiveness might one day do. He won't hate you, honey. Danny's got a heart big as the lake, sees the good in folks even when they stumble. But hiding, that'll poison us all, slow and sure. Inner thoughts swirled as I worked, a quiet monologue against the soft rasp of fabric on wood. This isn't revenge, Evie. Not some grand reckoning. Just truth served plain so healing has a chance to root. I'd learned that long ago, nursing Tom through his last days. Secrets only prolong the pain, while light, however harsh, cleared the way for dawn. So I stood, joints protesting faint with the morning's toll, and moved to the fridge, pulling out eggs and cheese, the door seal popping with a familiar suck. Let's eat first, I said, cracking shells into a bowl, the yolks bright as hope against the white. Clear heads over empty stomachs. Then we talked to him together. She helped without a word, slicing bread with a serrated knife that whispered through crust, the butter melting sizzle in the pan as I laid the slices in. We ate at the table, the grilled cheese gooey and comforting, strings of cheddar pulling like fragile tethers between us. Conversation came in fits, small things, safe harbors. Her latest sketch, a half-finished portrait of Danny napping on the porch swing. My garden woes, the tomato splitting from too much rain. But beneath it, planning took shape, tentative as a blueprint sketched in pencil. Tonight, after supper, I suggested, dipping a corner of toast into the yolk's golden pool. We sit him down, no accusations flying. You own it, I share my hurt, and we ask him to hold space for us both. Lila nodded, chewing slow, her eyes distant but grateful. And if it's bad? I set my fork down, the tines clinking soft. Then we face it bad. But together, Lila. That's the action here. Not running, not lashing. Just showing up. The afternoon unspooled slow. A deliberate pause to gather ourselves. I retreated to the garden, the soil cool and yielding under my gloves, weeding rows of carrots with pulls that mirrored uprooting doubt. Earthworms wriggled free, pink and blind, and I whispered to them like old confidants. Growth needs turning over, doesn't it? Even the hurt parts. Lila vanished into her studio, the door clicking shut, but later she emerged with a small canvas. Me rendered in soft strokes, bent over these very beds, sunlight gilding my hair like a halo. For you, she said, holding it out tentative, the paint still tacky under my fingers. I traced the lines, seeing not just the lines of age, but the quiet strength she'd captured, and tears pricked again, warm this time. It's beautiful, child. Thank you. We hugged then, brief but fierce, her chin on my shoulder, the scent of turpentine clinging to her like resolve. Danny returned as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in bruises of orange and purple, his arms laden with grocery bags, ground beef for burgers, buns soft as clouds, a six-pack of root beer sweating beads on the paper. Supper was a careful dance. Him at the grill, smoke wreathing his face as patties hissed and popped, Lila tossing salad in the bowl I'd chipped years back, greens crisp and vinaigrette sharp, me setting the picnic table on the back porch, the cloth checkered red and white, lanterns flickering to life against the gathering dusk. We ate with forced lightness at first. Danny regaling us with mill tales, a new guy's botched weld that nearly sparked a fire, Lila chiming in with a funny client email, typos galore. Laughter bubbled up, genuine in spots but tension hummed beneath, a low vibration like the crickets starting their chorus. As plates cleared, the root beer fizzing flat in our glasses, I caught Danny's eye across the table, the lantern light carving shadows under his cheekbones. Son, I started, my voice steady as the porch rail I'd sanded smooth last summer. Lila and I need to talk with you. About something that happened. Nothing dire, but important. His fork paused midair, burger remnants dangling, and he set it down deliberate, wiping his hands on a napkin folded neat. Yeah? Shoot. Lila shifted beside me, her knee brushing mine under the table, a silent anchor, and took a breath that trembled the air. Danny, I messed up. With Evie. Bad. The words spilled then, her voice gaining strength like a river finding its course. The overheard vent, the petty joke about the laxatives, the actual batch that crossed the line into harm. She didn't spare herself, eyes fixed on her hands twisting in her lap, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks again. I was frustrated, feeling out of place with all the old ways, the advice. But that's no excuse. I heard her, babe. Literally. Danny listened, face unreadable at first, the night sound swelling around us, frogs croaking from the pond, leaves rustling faint in the breeze. When she finished, silence stretched, thick and expectant, his jaw working like he chewed on more than words. I jumped in then, my hand finding his across the table, the warmth of his skin grounding me. It's not just on her, Danny. I pushed too with my stories, my clinging to what's familiar. Made her feel small when I meant to lift her up. But this, it broke something in me, son. Trust, like a cup you can't quite glue back whole. He pulled his hand away gentle, running it over his face, exhaling long and ragged. Jesus, Lil. Laxatives? In moss cookies? That's not you. Or is it? Hurt flashed in his eyes, raw as an open wound, aimed at her, then softening as it turned to me. And you, Ma, why didn't you say sooner? We could've handled it quiet first. I cut in soft, not sharp, to see if mending was possible without dragging you through the mud. But now here we are. Family facing the mess. He leaned back, the chair creaking under his shift, and for a long beat, I thought he'd bolt. Rise and pace the yard like he did as a teen wrestling demons. Instead, he reached for Lila's hand, pulling her close, his arm around her shoulders like a shield. I don't know what to say. Mad as hell, yeah, at both of you for keeping this, for letting it twist like that. But I get it. Clashes, the old and new rubbing raw. Doesn't make it right, but I get it. Tears welled in his eyes then, surprising us all, one slipping free to trace his stubble. We're in this, all three. No more secrets eating us alive. The meeting stretched into the cooling night, words weaving tentative bridges. Danny's quiet anger giving way to questions, gentle probes that peeled back more layers. Lila's loneliness in a town that felt foreign, my fear of fading into the wallpaper of their youth. No yelling, no doors slamming. Just raw edges smoothed by lantern light and shared root beer. The fizz long gone but the sweetness lingering. By the time we stacked chairs and doused flames, exhaustion settled like dew, but so did resolve. As Danny hugged me goodnight in the doorway, his whisper warm against my ear. We'll fix this, Ma. Promise. I believed him, or wanted to. Action taken, not in fury but in facing. The first step toward whatever came next. Little did I know healing's path wound longer, through valleys we'd yet to glimpse. The days after that porchlit confession settled into an uneasy truce, like a house after a quake, walls still standing, but every creak a reminder of the shift beneath. We moved careful around each other. Danny playing buffer with his easy jokes and extra hugs, Lila and I exchanging glances that held apology and ache in equal measure. No more baking sessions for a spell. The kitchen felt too charged, the oven's heat a mirror to the simmer we all nursed. Instead we talked, halting at first, over morning coffee or evening walks down the lane, where fireflies blinked like hesitant stars against the dusk. Lila opened up more, her voice soft as the gravel under our shoes. Stories of her mother's rigid expectations, the way praise came rare as snow in July, leaving her starved for approval in ways that twisted into thorns. I'd listen, nodding slow, sharing my own scars. Tom's quiet withdrawals during hard times. How I'd learned to fill silences with stories to keep the loneliness at bay. Danny joined when he could, his presence a steady anchor, but it was clear the real work was between us women, mending what words had torn. But secrets, child, they're like weeds in a tended garden. Pull one and the roots tangle deeper, sprouting where you least expect. Ours chose a Sunday family barbecue to break surface, the kind of gathering I'd hosted every summer since Danny was knee-high, under the big tent in the backyard where laughter used to flow freer than the iced tea. This year, with Lila's folks driving up from Ohio for the first time. Her mama stern as starched collars, and her daddy quiet with a pipe clenched in his teeth. I'd hoped it might be a bomb, a chance to weave her world into ours proper. Invites went out weeks back before the cookie storm, and pride kept me from canceling. Besides, Danny insisted, clapping my shoulder with that grin of his. Show him we're solid, Ma. Like always. Lila helped prep in fits and starts, chopping veggies with a knife that flashed too quick, her smiles tight as drawstrings. It'll be fine, she'd murmur, more to herself than me. But I saw the worry etching faint lines around her eyes, the way she'd check her phone for messages from home, as if bracing for judgment. The day dawned clear and warm, the air humming with cicadas and the promise of good company. By noon the yard buzzed. Cousins chasing kids across the grass, aunts fanning themselves with paper plates, uncles clustered by the grill where Danny flipped ribs, smoke wreathing up thick with hickory and sauce's tangy bite. Lila's parents arrived fashionably late, their old sedan crunching gravel in the drive, her mama Edith sharp-featured with hair pinned in a bun like a coiled spring, stepping out first, appraising the spread with a pursed lip. Quite the spread, Evelyn, she said, her handshake firm but cool, eyes flicking over the checkered cloths and mason jar flowers like she measured them against some invisible scale. Her daddy, Walt, hung back, nodding hello with a puff of pipe smoke that smelled of cherry and regret, his eyes kind but distant. Lila hugged them fierce, her voice bright as forced summer. Mama, Daddy, come meet everyone. But I caught Edith's glance linger on me, appraising, as if she sensed the undercurrent rippling beneath the chatter. We played at normalcy through the early hours. Plates piled high with coleslaw creamy and crisp, baked beans bubbling sweet from the crock pot, ribs falling off the bone with the pull that stained fingers red. Laughter rose in waves, Aunt Clara's tales of her latest bingo win. Little Tommy's face smeared with sauce as he chased fireflies early. I moved among them, refilling glasses with lemonade tart as wit, my sundress swishing soft against my calves, But my eyes kept drifting to Lila, seated between her parents on the picnic bench, her posture rigid as a fence post. Edith leaned in close, voice carrying on the breeze. Settling in then? Danny seems a good boy, steady job, family roots. But mind you don't lose yourself in all this provincial charm. Lila's laugh tinkled, brittle as thin ice. Oh mama, it's fine. Evie's been wonderful, teaching me the ropes. But her eyes met mine across the yard, pleading silent. Help. It cracked open over dessert. Innocent as pie, my blackberry cobbler, still steaming in the cast iron. The crust golden and flaky. Berries bursting purple under spoons. We'd gathered in a loose circle under the tent, chairs scraping dirt as folks settled with second helpings, the sun slanting long through the leaves. Edith, ever the conversationalist, turned to me with a smile that didn't thaw. Evelyn, Lila tells me you're quite the baker. Passed down secrets, has she? My girl was hopeless in the kitchen back home. Burnt more batches than she baked. Chuckles rippled around the circle, light, but Lila flushed, her fork pausing midair. A berry's juice staining the tines. I felt the moment teeter, like a glass tipped on its edge, and instead of letting it spill sweet, my hurt, still tender, unhealed, nudged me forward. Oh, she's a quick study, I said, voice warm but threaded with truth. Though we had a hiccup with the cookies last week. A little extra ingredient that didn't sit right. Live and learn. The words landed soft, meant as a bridge, but Edith's brow arched sharp, her spoon clinking against the plate. Extra ingredient? What, some family secret gone awry? The circle quieted, heads turning subtle, curiosity pricking like thorns. Lila's face drained pale, her hand gripping the bench slat white-knuckled, and Danny, across from me with a rib bone in hand, froze, sauce glistening, forgotten. I saw my misstep then, too late, the casual mention blooming into spotlight, the private fracture exposed to the sun. Nothing serious. I hurried, but the damage rippled, Aunt Clara piping up with a concerned tilt. Evie, you ill? Should have said, we'd have brought broth. Whispers stirred, cousins exchanging glances, and Edith turned to Lila, voice slicing clean. Lila Marie, what've you done now? Can't even bake without fuss. Lila stood abrupt, the bench scraping harsh, her plate tipping to scatter berries like blood across the cloth. It was nothing. A stupid mistake, laxatives, okay? As a joke, because Evie's advice felt like lectures and I lashed out. I'm not proud, all right? The words tumbled out, raw and ragged, hanging in the stunned hush that followed, the cicadas seeming to pause in shock. Gasps dotted the air, soft from the aunts, a low whistle from an uncle, and Edith's face hardened to stone, her hand flying to her chest as if struck. Laxatives? In your mother-in-law's food? Lord have mercy, girl. What were you thinking? Walt cleared his throat, pipe forgotten, his voice gravelly quiet. Edith, easy. Sounds like young folks clashing. But the damage bloomed, eyes turning to Lila, pitying from some, judging from others, her shoulders hunching as if to fold herself small. Danny rose then, slow and steady, his chair tipping back with a thud that echoed the heartbeat in my ears. He pulled Lila to him, arm around her waist firm, facing the circle with a jaw set like his father's. Hey now, it's out, so let's own it. Lila messed up, yeah, petty and wrong. But Ma pushed too, with words that landed heavy when she meant help. We're working it family style. No one's the villain here. His voice carried, calm authority cutting the murmur, but I saw the cost in his eyes, the flicker of pain at airing our laundry in the breeze. Edith stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled faint, her gaze boring into Lila like a drill. Working it? After that? Evelyn, I apologize for my daughter. She's got my temper but none of my sense. We'll talk on the drive home, won't we, Lila? The question snapped like a whip, and Lila nodded, tears brimming but unshed, her chin lifting defiant. Yes, ma'am. Evie. I'm sorry. Again. The gathering frayed after that, slow as unraveling yarn. Folks murmuring goodbyes with hugs that lingered awkward. Plates stacked hasty, the tent flap stirring in a sudden gust like sighs of relief. Edith and Walt left early, their sedan kicking dust down the drive, Lila trailing with a final haunted glance over her shoulder. Danny helped me clean in silence, stacking chairs with clangs that rang hollow, the yard emptying to echoes. That got away from us, Ma, he said finally, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm streaked in sauce. I nodded, folding the checkered cloth, the berry stains dark as regrets. Truth has a way, son. But justice? It's not punishment. It's just the light hitting what was hidden. Consequences hung heavy that night. Lila's isolation in the quiet drive with her parents, whispers likely to ripple through kin for weeks, my own heart aching at the spectacle I'd unwittingly sparked. Yet in the dignity of it, no shouts, no banishment, there was a quiet equity, the scales tipping toward understanding, even as the weight pressed on. As dusk deepened, fireflies winking tentative in the grass, I sat on the porch steps alone, the wood warm from the day's sun, a glass of water sweating in my hand. The public knowing brought shame's sting, yes, for Lila most keen, her petty act laid bare like a wound to air. But it also freed something, child. The secret's power broken, leaving room for what came after. Little did I know the healing would ask more of us still, drawing us closer through the very vulnerability we'd feared. The fallout from that barbecue lingered like the faint char of hickory on the air, smoky, pervasive, but fading with time if you let the breeze do its work. Lila and her parents' drive home stretched into a 2-day affair. Her text to Danny sparse at first, talking it out. Miss you. Then a call late one night. Her voice muffled through the phone pressed to his ear as he paced the living room, the floorboards groaning under his socked feet. I caught fragments from the kitchen doorway, nursing a mug of chamomile that steamed gentle curls toward the ceiling fan. Mama's disappointed, but Daddy said grace covers a multitude. I feel like such a fool. Evie probably hates me now. Danny's responses were low murmurs, reassuring, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck in that habit he had when worry knotted tight. When he hung up, he found me there, the mug warm between my palms, and pulled me into a hug that smelled of sawdust and soap. She's coming back tomorrow, Ma. And she wants counseling. All of us. Thinks it might help untangle this mess. I nodded against his shoulder, the fabric of his shirt soft from too many washes, and felt a quiet bloom in my chest. Not relief exactly, but the stirrings of possibility, like seeds pushing through winter soil. Counseling started the following week, in a small office downtown with walls the color of faded denim and a window overlooking the river, where barges glided slow like thoughts too heavy to rush. Dr. Harlan, mid-50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like worn leather, sat in a wingback chair that creaked when he leaned forward, notepad balanced on his knee. Our first session felt awkward as new shoes, the three of us arranged in a semicircle. Danny slouched in the middle, arms crossed loose. Lila beside him, fingers laced tight in her lap, nails bitten to pale moons. Me across, hands folded proper, the scent of his sandalwood diffuser mingling with the faint must of old books on the shelf. Start wherever feels safe, Dr. Harlan said, his pen poised but not scratching, eyes kind behind the lenses. Silence pooled thick as honey until Lila broke it, her voice small but steady. I poisoned Evie's cookies. Not fatally, but with laxatives. Because her advice made me feel trapped, like I was failing some test I didn't know I was taking. The words hung unadorned, and I watched her shoulders drop a fraction, as if naming it aloud loosened a knot. Danny shifted, his knee bouncing faint, but he nodded, turning to me. And Ma, you held it in too long, let it fester. We all did. Dr. Harlan guided us then, gentle prompts like, what did that feel like, Evelyn? And I found myself speaking truths I'd buried under politeness. The ache of betrayal sharp as the cramps that night. The fear that my love, offered freely, had become a cage. I wanted to pull her close, I said, my voice catching on the river's distant murmur outside. But instead, I pushed with stories that echoed too loud in her quiet. Lila listened, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks, and when her turn came again, she shared deeper. The weight of her mother's expectations, how my warmth, well-meant, stirred echoes of inadequacy. Sessions blurred into weeks, each one a slow unraveling. Laughter creeping in over shared vulnerabilities, like the time Danny admitted his own frustrations at the mill, feeling caught between our worlds. We learned tools, breathing exercises that filled lungs with calm, I statements that bridged gaps without blame. Vulnerability, Dr. Harlan called it, the soft underbelly that mends what armor breaks. Back home, the healing wove into our days, thread by deliberate thread. Baking resumed, tentative at first. A simple loaf of bread one rainy afternoon, the kitchen filled with the yeasty rise of dough and the patter of drops on the tin roof. Lila measured flour with a steady hand, no longer glancing at her phone for inspiration, and I shared the recipe card without lecture. Just a quiet "your turn to add the salt. Feel it through your fingers." Our elbows brushed as we kneaded, the rhythm syncing like heartbeats, and when the loaf emerged golden, crust crackling under the knife, we sliced it, warm butter melting pools on our plates. "Better than any fool's gold," she said, a small smile tugging her lips, and I laughed, real from the belly, the sound echoing off the cabinets like forgiveness taking root. Danny joined us more, his presence lightening the air, but it was our moments, Lila and mine, that stitched the deepest. Walks in the garden at dusk where I'd point out the resilient weeds. "See how they push through? That's us." Or evenings on the porch swing, creaking gentle as we sip tea, her head leaning tentative on my shoulder, the fireflies our silent witnesses. Edith called once, a week in, her voice crackling over the line from Ohio, stiff but softened at the edges. "Heard you're all in therapy. Good on you, Evelyn." "Lila's. She's trying." I held the receiver close, the cord twisting around my finger like old habits. "We all are, Edith. Takes a village, doesn't it?" No grand apologies, but a thaw, invites exchanged for a fall visit, recipes swapped over email, her lemon squares arriving crisp in the mail one Tuesday, a white flag in wax paper. The family whispers faded too, kin reaching out with cards that read "heard about the dust-up," sending love, no judgment, and Aunt Clara dropping by with a pie, her hug fierce as she whispered, "Proud of you for facing it head-on, Evie. That's strength." Dignity held us through, child. Not in perfection but in the showing up, the quiet work of rebuilding what petty fears had chipped. Months turned the page to autumn, leaves carpeting the yard in crimson and gold, the air crisp with wood smoke and change. One evening as frost nipped the first buds, Lila knocked soft on my bedroom door. A sketchpad tucked under her arm. "Evie? Got something for you." We sat on the quilted bedspread, Tom's old one, faded blue and white checks, and she flipped pages, landing on a series, portraits of us three rendered in warm charcoals. Me in the garden, hands in soil, lines of worry softened to wisdom. Danny at the grill, smoke curling like dreams, her between us, face tilted up with a smile that held no shadows. "It's us," she said, simple, tracing the edge with a finger still smudged from the day's work. "Whole. Because of the hard stuff." Tears welled then, mutual and unashamed, and I pulled her close, her hair soft against my cheek, the scent of graphite and home. "You mended more than cookies, honey. You mended me. Showed this old heart there's room for new ways without losing the old. Healing isn't a straight path. Oh no. There were stumbles, nights when old hurt surfaced like ghosts in the fog, words sharper than intended. But vulnerability, that sharpest cut, proved the best balm, opening wide enough for light to flood the cracks, turning fractures to facets that caught the sun. Danny proposed a family trip come spring. A cabin by the lake, fishing lines and no clocks, and we planned it over cocoa one night, steam rising like prayers, laughter weaving through the steam. I watched them across the table, my son and his wife, hands linked casual, and felt peace settle deep, a quiet strength born of scars that told stories worth sharing. The lesson? Families not forged in perfection, child, but in the brave act of bearing souls, letting grace fill the spaces where trust once broke. We emerged not unbroken, but beautifully bent, stronger for the yield.